So starting back again, I'd just like to go back to page 21. Just want to clear up something there. Um, where were they taught? Okay. Okay, a bag of fig rolls lay snugly in Armstrong's satchel. He curled them between his palms at whiles and swallowed them softly. Crumbs that he adhered to the tissue of his lips sweetened by his breath. Well off people proud that their eldest son was in the Navy. Vico Road Ducky. I think previously I said that was the young boy, but I actually think it's the young boy's elder brother. And Vico Road Ducky, that's where he's from. That's what that, just to clear that up. So moving on to page 25, starting back again. He brought out of his coat a pocketbook bound by a leather thong. It slapped open, and he took from it 2 notes, one of giant halves, and laid them carefully on the table. I think I covered this, but one of giant halves. That's great imagery from Joyce there again. Just imagine, like €10 note, $10 note, 10 whatever note, fold in half. Just the way it's put there. Next line. 2, he said, strapping and stowing his pocketbook away. So 2, he's paying him the £2 or whatever. And next line. And now his strong room for the gold. And now his strong room for the gold. I think that's Stephen Dedalus here. He's thinking. He's just thinking. He's saying, okay, and now now Mr. DC is now his strong room for the gold, which would be the coinage probably, and he's Stephen Dedalus has just thought that in his mind. Stephen's embarrassed hand moved over the shells heaped in the cold stone mortar. Whelks and money, cowries and leopard shells, and this hoard as a nimmer's turban, and this the scallop of St. James, an old pilgrim's hoard, dead treasure, hollow shells. I'm going to read that paragraph back now in a few seconds, but first, I think it would be a good idea if listeners, now in this sitting, I'm going to cover the next 6 pages, and I think it would be a good idea if listeners would read ahead before they listen to what I have to say, because it's only when you actually read it yourself that the imagery really becomes crystal clear. It's like you're thinking about a line, and then you're thinking, and then all of a sudden when you figure it out, that's when it really becomes clear. This is one of the great things about Joyce's writing. It's you have to think, and when you think, and when you figure out what he's talking about, that's when it becomes, crystal clear. More or less. And that's the great is one of the great things in Joyce's writing was his imagery, and that's why really to get a good grasp of Joyce and Ulysses in particular, you need a good visual intelligence. Dare I use that word, but that's what you need. You don't need an intelligence for a mathematician, or you need a good visual intelligence. And there's a lot of people out there that have that, and they don't actually realize that they do have it. And it would be great to just discover and understand Ulysses for yourself. But anyways, I think it would be if people could read ahead for the next 6 pages, and then if they listen to what I have to say, you may get stuck, you may not. But if you do get stuck, maybe I can point you in the right direction. And it's only when people do that, as I said, that you really can grasp the pure genius of Joyce, the way he could paint that clear picture in your mind. And it's not done rapidly. Mostly, it's done it's very, very slow, and you gotta think, and then when it becomes, oh, that's it, I know what he's talking about now. And this is a perfect example. I'm gonna read this paragraph again. And now a strong run from the goal. Stephen's embarrassed hand moved over the shells. Now let's just think about that for a second. Stephen's embarrassed hand moved over the shells, heaped in the cold stone mortar. So obviously Stephen is he's put his hand, I would say, on the wall. He's put one hand on the wall, and now he's strong room for the goal. So Stephen, just visualize him. You have to visualize Stephen now in this office with Mr. DC, and he's put one hand, he put one hand on the wall like anybody would do. Stephen's embarrassed hand moved over the shells, heaped in the cold stone mortar. So on this wall, I think, there's shells. There's like shells. It's like seashells just stuck there, or there could be, more or less, it could be part of the plaster arrangement on the wall. We don't know, but it really doesn't matter. He more or less had his hand on the wall, moved over the shells, heaped in the cold stone mortar, whelks and money. These are, I think, shells, cowries and leper shells, and this is, what's this here? I'm feeling with my hand. Whore as an immer's turban, and this shell, he's thinking, this shell I'm feeling here, the scallop of St. James, and then he thinks an old pilgrim's hoard. It's like an old, shells, dead treasure, hollow shells. That's what I think is going on there. Next line: a sovereign fell, bright and new, on the soft pile of the tablecloth. A sovereign fell, which is, coinage. A sovereign is like, it's coinage like a sovereign fell bright and new on the soft pile of the tablecloth. Now, Joyce, that's all Joyce says in this line. A sovereign fell. Where did it fall from? Did it fall from the ceiling, the sky? Where? You have to read on to, this is typical Joyce. He throw, and he doesn't, and then he'll explain it very soon. Next line: 3, Mr. DC said. 3 sovereigns, obviously. Turning his little saving box about in his hand. These are handy things to have. See, this is for sovereigns, this is for shillings, sixpences, half crowns, and here, crowns. See. So obviously Mr. DC here has got some kind of a mechanism where, this kinds, how would I describe this? You sometimes see them in arcades, I think, where, you press a lever and the money shoots out. There'd be one for for different kind of like pennies, 2 cents, so on and so forth, for different coinage. And the little small little lever, you just press it down and it shoots out 1, 2, 3, or so on and so forth. So read that again. 3, Mr. DC said, turning his little saving box about in his hand. So this is the kind of a mechanism. These are handy things to have, these kind of mechanisms. See, this is for sovereigns, this kind of a shoot. This is sovereigns. This one is for shillings, sixpences, half crowns, and here crowns, so on and so forth. Next line, great line here. He shot from it 2 crowns and 2 shillings. He shot, so he probably obviously pressed the lever, like he shot twice. He shot from it 2 crowns and 2 shillings. Next line. 312, he said, I think you'll find that's right. So Mr. DC is saying to, that's what he owes him. 312, he said, I think you'll find that's right. Next line. Thank you, sir, Stephen said, gathering the money together with shy haste and putting it all in the pocket of his trousers. Next line. No thanks at all, Mr. DC said. You have earned it. Next line. Stephen's hand, free again, went back to the hollow shells. Symbols too of beauty and of power, a lump in my pocket, symbols soiled by greed and misery. I want to read that again. Stephen's hand, free again, went back to the hollow shells. He put his hand against the wall again. Symbols, and then he's thinking, symbols too of beauty and of power. Now, Joyce here hasn't really said, is he talking about the shells or is he talking about the money? But if I to guess, you would have to say he's talking about money here. Symbols too of beauty and of power. Um, excuse me. Um, Symbols too of beauty and of power. I would say money, but it could be shells. We don't know. Joyce is a bit vague here, deliberately so. Symbols too of beauty and power, but I think it's money. And then the next line, a lump in my pocket. This is another example of Joyce's innuendo and saying something without saying it. A lump in my pocket, which is the money in his pocket, but Joyce is obviously referring to another lump in his pocket. Symbols soiled by greed and money. A lump in my pocket. Maybe women might get there quicker than men might get it. I don't know. But that's what Joyce is inferring to. He's having a bit of fun here. There's a sexual undertone to that. Stephen's hand, free again, went back to the hollow shell. Symbols too of beauty and of power. A lump in my pocket, which is the money. But Joyce is also insinuating something else. And no doubt he was chuckling to himself when he wrote that. Symbols soiled by greed and misery. That's money. Next line. Don't carry it like that, Mr. Deasy said. You'll pull it out somewhere and lose it. You just buy one of these machines. You'll find them very handy. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Don't carry it like that. Don't carry the money like that, Mr. Deasy said. You'll pull it out somewhere. You'll pull it out of your pocket and lose the money. You just buy one of these machines, one of these mechanisms I have. You'll find them very handy. Next line. Answer something. Now, answer something. That's just great the way that it's done there. This two word, answer something. So Stephen Adels is thinking, shoot, I must answer something. He says, I must say something back to him. Answer something. And that's what that means. Answer something. He's thinking, answer, I must reply to him. Next line. Mine would be often empty, Stephen said. If you bought one of these mechanisms, it would be empty. You wouldn't have any money for it. The next line, the same room, an hour, the same wisdom, and I the same. 3 times now, 3 nooses round me here. Well, I can break them in this instant if I will. So Stephen Dallas is thinking here now. This is the same room that I missed Mr. Deasy in the first day he came to the school. He's thinking the same room, an hour. It's actually at the same hour, the same wisdom. He's on about the same stuff. And I the same, and I'm the same. 3 times now. So he's more or less saying I've been paid here 3 times, and then he has a bit of a bit of humour. 3 nooses round me here. Well, I can break them in this instant if I will. I can break them in this. I can leave this job. I think. Next line. Because you don't save, Mr. Deasy said, pointing his finger. Just to visualize Mr. Deasy pointing his finger. Friendly kind of. Because you don't say, Mr. Deasy said, pointing his finger, you don't know yet what money is. Money is power. When you have lived as long as I have, I know, if you'd but knew. But what does Shakespeare say? Put but money in thy purse. Self-explanatory. Next line. Ego, Stephen murmured. That's a line from Shakespeare play, obviously. Next line. He lifted his gaze from the idle shelves to the old man's face. That's Stephen de Dallas. Taking his hand off from the wall, and he lifted his gaze from the idle shelves to the old man's face. Mr. Deasy's face. Next line. He knew what money was, Mr. Deasy said. He made money. A poet, but an Englishman too. Do you know what is the pride of the English? Do you know what is the proudest word you will ever hear from an Englishman's mouth? This is Mr. Deasy saying, or speaking. Next line. The sea's ruler. His sea-cold eyes looked on the empty bay. His sea-cold eyes looked on the empty bay. History is to blame on me and on my words, unhating. So this is Stephen Adels thinking here. Now we come across this line before earlier on in the first 20 pages. The sea's ruler. I think I refer to it. Sea's ruler. I refer to it as being could be the wind. Um, Also, the seas ruler could be waves. So, and Stephen of Dallas here is saying the seas ruler. He's referring to England. Seas ruler could be a lot of things. Um, in the instant before, it could have been that. It could have been the wind. It could be in the waves. Um, but Stephen of Dallas is just thinking here. The seas ruler. He's meaning England because I think England would have ruled the waves, as they say, in them times. England had a powerful navy, I'm sure. The seas ruler, his sea cold eyes looked on the empty bay. His sea cold eyes looked on the empty bay. He could be thinking there in the morning when he's looking on the bay. Um, History is, and he's thinking back to that line we read previously. History is to blame, which Haynes said to him, on me and on my words unhating. That's kind of basically. I mean, I need more time and to think about that, but I'm going to continue on. Next line. So that on his empire, Stephen said, the sun never sets. So this is an answer to what Mr. DC said. Do you know what is the proudest word you will ever hear in Englishman's mouth? Um, so this is an answer to this. Do you know what is the proudest word you will ever hear from an Englishman's mouth? And Stephen Dallas answers, that on his emperor, Stephen said, the sun never sets. That's pretty self-explanatory. The sun never sets. The British Empire was no doubt huge at that time. The sun never sets because it's all over the world basically. Next line, bah, Mr. DC said, that's not English. A French Celt said that. He tapped his saving box against his thumbnail. Next line, I will tell you, he said solemnly, what is the proudest boast? What is it? I will tell you, he said solemnly, what is his proudest boast? I paid my way. Good man, next line, good man. So this is Stephen de Dallas thinking here. He says, he's thinking to himself and he's having a bit of fun in his mind. Good man, more or less fair play to you. He's being sarcastic, obviously. Next line, I paid my way. I never borrowed a shilling in my life. Shilling is coinage. It's like a coin in them times. I paid my way. I never borrowed a shilling in my life. Can you feel that? I owe nothing. Can you? Mr. DC is saying to Stephen that. Can you feel that? I owe nothing. Can you? Next line. Mulligan, £9, 3 pairs of socks, 1 pair brogues, ties, Curran, 10 guineas, McCann, 1 guinea, Fred Ryan, 2 shillings, Temple, 2 lunches, Russell, 1 guinea, Cousins, 10 shillings, Bob Reynolds, half a guinea, Carler, I am absolutely very bad at pronouncing words, but that's my best attempt. Carler, 3 guineas, Mrs. McKernan, 5 weeks board, the lump I have is useless. So, what's going on here basically is Stephen Dallas is thinking, back to the previous line, I paid my way, I never borrowed a shilling in my life. Can you feel that? I owe nothing. Can you? Mr. DC says Stephen Dallas. Now, Stephen Dallas starts thinking, Mulligan, £9. He's more or less saying, Mulligan, I owe Mulligan £9 for 3 pairs of socks and for 1 pair of brogues, which are shoes, for 1 pair of shoes, for ties. He gave me ties, I owe him for that. Then he thinks, Curran, I owe a person called Curran, I owe him 10 guineas. Guineas is a monetary sum. It's like over £1 or something. I owe Curran 10 guineas. McGann, I owe him 1 guinea, which is over £1. Fred Ryan, I owe him 2 shillings. Temple, which is probably a pub. Temple Bear is a famous pub in Dublin called the Temple Bear, so it could be the Temple Bear. Temple, 2 lunches. It's a pub. I owe them for 2 lunches. Russell, 1 guinea. I owe Russell, a person called Russell, 1 guinea. Cousins, I owe him 10 shillings. A person called Cousins, I owe him 10 shillings. Bob Reynolds, I owe him half a guinea. Caller, I owe him 3 guineas. Mrs. McKernan, I owe her 5 weeks board, 5 weeks lodging, rent, more or less. The lump I have is useless. Joyce, a bit of sexual innuendo here again. The lump I have is useless. The lump of money I have here is useless. The money he got is useless, he's more or less saying. But Joyce deliberately used the word the lump I have is useless. Um, the next line. For the moment, no, Stephen answered. So he's answering. He has answered. Uh, he's answered Mr. Deasy's dialogue now. For the moment, no. Um, can you feel that I owe nothing? Can you? For the moment, no, Stephen answered. Mr. Deasy laughed with rich delight, putting back his saving box. Next line. I knew you couldn't, he said joyously, but one day you must feel it. We are a generous people, but we must also be just. Reading that again. This is Mr. Deasy speaking. I knew you couldn't, he said joyously, but one day you must feel it. We are a generous people, but we must also be just. We are a generous people, but we must also be just. Mr. Deasy, I'd say here, obviously is of English extraction. Probably, I'd say a Protestant. We are a generous people. He's referring to the English. We are a generous people. We must also be just. Next line. I fear those big words, Stephen said, which makes us so unhappy. I fear those big words, Stephen said, which makes us so unhappy. Next line. Mr. Deasy stared sternly for some moments over the mantelpiece at the shapely bulk of a man in tartan fillybegs, Albert Edward, Prince of Wales. Now, that's Mr. Deasy stares sternly for some moments over the mantelpiece. Visualize the mantelpiece in this room at the shapely bulk of a man in tartan fillybegs. Tartan fillybegs. That's tartan fillybegs or fillybegs. Like a Scottish, someone is dressed in a kilt or something along them lines. In tartan, it's a picture of someone over the fireplace, basically. Mr. Deasy is staring at a picture that's hung on the wall. Mr. Deasy stares sternly for some moments over the mantelpiece at the shapely bulk of a man in tartan fillybegs, which is a picture of someone. Albert Edward, Prince of Wales. Albert Edward. Now, here Joyce having a bit of humour again. He's saying Albert Edward. Or, he could have said Prince or whatever. Albert Edward. I don't think I'm not sure whether anybody ever called Albert Edward, but Joyce has called him that anyway. Prince of Wales. A member of the royal family. Just in a picture over the mantelpiece. Next line. You think me an old fogey and an old Tory, his thoughtful voice said. I saw 3 generations since O'Connell's time. I remember the famine. Do you know that the Orange Lodges agitated for repeal of the Union 20 years before O'Connell did, or before the prelates of your communion denounced him as a demagogue? You Fenians forget some things. So this is Mr. Deasy here speaking. You think me an old fogey and an old Tory, his thoughtful voice said. I saw 3 generations since O'Connell's time, which Daniel O'Connell was a person, a very well-known person in Irish history. Daniel O'Connell, to the best of my knowledge, Daniel O'Connell, he done a lot, to get, I think, Catholic emancipation in Ireland and so on and so forth, and he done a lot for, the ordinary people of Ireland. I saw 3 generations since O'Connell's time, since Daniel O'Connell's time. I remember the famine, the famine back in the 1800s, 1845, around that time. I remember the famine. Do you know that the Orange Lodges agitated for repeal of the Union 20 years before O'Connell? So this Mr. Deasy would be obviously of the he would be a Protestant, I would say, and the Orange Lodges, probably in the north of Ireland, that they wanted to get repeal of the Union even 20 years before O'Connell did, or before the prelates of your communion, meaning the bishops and archbishops of the Catholic Church denounced him as a demagogue, denounced O'Connell as a demagogue. You Fenians, meaning you Catholics, forget some things. So basically what he's more or less saying there that, the Protestants in Ireland at that time wanted, I think, I think that um, a lot of the Protestants that time in Ireland were, they wanted like home rule as well in Ireland, away from England. I think that's what that's referring to. Next line. Glorious, pious, and immortal memory, the Lodge of Diamond in Armagh, the splendid, behung with corpses of papists, horse, mast, and armed, the planters' covenant. The Black North and true blue Bible, crappies lie down. So I think this is Stephen Dallas just thinking here, glorious, pious, and immortal memory, the Lodge of Diamond, which is the Orange Lodge somewhere in the north, I'd say, or whatever. The Orange of Diamond in Armagh, sorry. The Lodge of Diamond in Armagh, the splendors be hung with corpses of papists, more or less saying the hung Catholics, papists would be Catholics. Horse, mast, and armed, the planters' covenant. The planters. Go back in Irish history. I think they refer to the people of the Protestant extraction being um, they're settled in the north of Ireland. I think they call them planters. Planters called the Black North, and the Black North. It's kind of a referring to the Protestant and Catholics in the north of Ireland, more or less. The Black North and true blue Bible. Crappies lie down. Crappies, I think, would be the Catholics. If the struggle going on in the north down through history and so on and so forth. Next line, Stephen skewed a brief gesture. So Stephen just kind of skewed a brief gesture. He twisted his head or whatever, Next line, I have rebel blood in me too, Mr. Deasy said, on the Spindle side. But I am descended from Sir John Blackwood, who voted for the Union. We are all Irish, all king's sons. So Mr. Deasy is saying, I have rebel blood in me too. I want to break away from England, to get freedom from, for Ireland, away from England. I have rebel blood in me too. On the Spindle side, meaning his mother's surname was called Spindle. On the Spindle side, on my mother's side. But I'm descended from Sir John Blackwood, who voted for the Union. So his father was, or his ancestors, grandfather, whatever. But I'm descended from Sir John Blackwood, who voted for the Union. So I would say his grandfather or great grandfather he'd be more for the United Kingdom, more or less, I think. But I'm descended from Sir John Blackwood, who voted for the Union. We are all Irish, all king's sons. We are all Irish, Protestants, Catholics, we're all Irish, all king's sons. Yes. Next line, alas, Stephen said. So Stephen just answered, alas. He doesn't agree with it, I don't think. Next line, per vis rectas, Mr. Deasy said firmly, was his motto. He's referring to his ancestor, Sir John Blackwood. Per vis vectus, or whatever that is, Mr. Deasy said firmly, was his motto. He voted for it and put on his top boots to ride to Dublin from the heirs of Down to do so. He voted for this union. He voted for and put on his top boots, to ride on a horse to Dublin from the heirs of Down to do so. Lel the rel the re the rocky road to Dublin. So either Mr. Deasy has said this out loud, or Stephen Dallas could possibly be thinking of it. But this is actually very interesting here. Lel the rel the re the rocky road to Dublin. Now the rocky road to Dublin, there's a pretty famous song here in Ireland called the Rocky Road to Dublin. You would hear it being sung in the bars and so on and so forth. The Rocky Road to Dublin. Now this is another thing about Ulysses that a lot of people don't know about, and I never heard it mentioned before. That there's at least 50 songs, if not more, in Ulysses that got their name of the songs, or got the first line for their songs, or got the whole idea for the songs taken from Ulysses. And now I'm not 100% sure in this instant here, the Rocky Road to Dublin, but I know in a lot of other instances, a lot of these songs that got the idea came from reading Ulysses, and this could be an example. The name of the song, this famous song I'm talking about, is called I think it's called the Rocky Road to Dublin. So it's very possible that the idea came here. Lal the Roll, the Rocky Road to Dublin. Now I could be wrong about that, but there is a lot of other songs that we're going to come across, and in actual fact, another thing that I remember coming across in reading Ulysses was the famous film or movie in America called Gone with the Wind, Terror, and so on and so forth. We're going to come across that in Ulysses, a mention of Gone with the Wind, and the next line, Terror, is mentioned, and so on and so forth. And when we actually come to it and read it, you say, okay, that's how they got the idea for the name of that film, movie, and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of things in Ulysses where people just got their whole idea from, and I think that song, here we are, Lal the Rel, the Rocky Road to Dublin. Um, Next line, this a gruff squire on horseback with shiny top boots, soft day, Sir John, soft day, your honour, space, day, space, two top boots, jog dangling on to Dublin, Lel the Rel, the Ra, Lel the Rel, the Ready. So this is just Stephen de Dallas thinking here, and he's thinking about this squire, gruff squire, which is this person, Sir John Blackwood. The name for a person like that, I think they call him squire. A gruff squire on horseback with shiny top boots. He's thinking about this son, John Blackwood. Shiny top boots. Yes, that's great writing, Majai. Shiny top boots. They would be polished. Soft day, meaning, soft day. It's not a bad day. Sir John, he's just thinking, soft day, Your Honour. Day, two top boots. Jog dangling on to Dublin. Lal the Rel. He's just thinking there, that's all. Next line. That reminds me, Mr. Deasy said, you can do me a favour, Mr. de Dallas, with some of your literary friends. I've a letter here for the press. Sit down a moment. I have just to copy the end. Next line. He went to the desk near the window, pulled in his chair twice, and read off some words from the sheet on the drum of the typewriter. So it's pretty easy to understand there. That reminds me, Mr. DC said, you can do me a favour, Mr. Dallas, with some of your literary friends. I have a letter here for the press. Sit down a moment. I have just to copy the end. Now, he went to the desk near the window. This is Mr. DC. He went to the desk near the window, pulled in his chair twice. This is important. Pulled in his chair twice. Now, just visualize anybody. You're sitting down. You're pulling your chair. You pull it in. You don't pull it in once. You usually pull it in twice. Pulling his chair twice. This is how exact Joyce was always when he's writing. Pulled in his chair twice and read off some words from the sheet on the drum of his typewriter. Great imagery there from Joyce. Next line. Sit down. Excuse me, he said over his shoulder. The dictates of common sense. Just a moment. So Mr. DC is saying to Stephen de Dallas, sit down. Excuse me, I should have told you earlier. Sit down, excuse me, he said over his shoulder. He's looking over his shoulder. The dictates of common sense. Just a moment. Next line. He peered from under his shaggy brows at the manuscript by his elbow, and muttering began to prod the stiff buttons of the keyboard slowly, sometimes blowing as he screwed up the drum to erase an error. Excuse me. Now, let me just read that again, them three lines again. He peered from under his shaggy brows at the manuscript by his elbow, and muttering began to prod the stiff buttons of the keyboard slowly, sometimes blowing as he screwed up the drum to erase an error. Now that seemed like very simple writing there. But knowing Joyce here, Joyce is also implying something else, if you just think about it, and I have to read it again. And without a doubt, Joyce is implying something else here, because it's the words he uses. He peered from under his shaggy brows at the manuscript by his elbow, and muttering, began to prod the stiff buttons. Began to prod, he used the word prod, began to prod the stiff buttons of the keyboard, slowly, sometimes blowing as he screwed up the drum to erase an error. Now, Joyce used the word screw, and screwed, and he used the word prod here, deliberately. This is not by accident. He peered from under his shaggy brows at the manuscript by his elbow, and muttering, began to prod the stiff buttons of the keyboard. So Joyce is referring to something else here. Began to prod the stiff buttons of the keyboard slowly, sometimes blowing as he screwed up the drum to erase an error. That's for the listener now. Figure that out, but be thinking in a kind of a sexual way, and that's what Joyce has thrown in there. Next line. Stephen seated himself noiselessly before the princely presence. Stephen seated himself noiselessly before the princely presence. That's the picture of the mantelpiece. Next line. Framed around the walls, images of vanished horses stood in homage. Their meek heads poised in air. Lord Hastings repulse. The Duke of Westminster, shot over. The Duke of Beaufort's Ceylon, Prix de Paris, 1866. Elfin riders set them, watchful of a sign. He saw their speeds, backing king's colours, and shouted with the shouts of vanished crowds. So Stephen seated himself noiselessly before the princely presence, which is the picture over the mantelpiece, and he's looking at the other pictures also on the wall. Framed around the walls, pictures, images of vanished horses. All these, all these English, people in the past, sitting on horses. That's what that is there. Framed around the walls, images of vanished horses stood in homage. Their meek heads poised in air. Lord Hastings repulse. I'm sure there's no person called Lord Hastings repulse, but Joyce has thrown the word repulse. A bit of fun. The Duke of Westminster shot over. Shot over. Joyce has put a surname called Shot Over, I think. The Duke of Beaufort's Ceylon, Prix de Paris, 1866. Elfin riders set them, watchful of a sign. He saw their speeds, backing king's colours. Backing king's colours. That's the king of England would have horses, and he would have his own colours. The jockey would be wearing the king's colours, backing king's colours, and shouted with the shouts of vanished crowds. Vanished crowds. They're all dead now. Next line. Full stop. Mr. D.C. bade his keys, but prompt ventilation of this important question. Full stop. So Mr. D.C. has finished the letter. Full stop. Mr. D.C. bade his keys, but prompt ventilation of this important question. Next line. Where Cranley led me to get rich quick, hunting his winners among the mud-splashed brakes, amid the balls of bookies on their pitches, and reek of the canteen over the motley slush. Even money, fair rebel, 10 to 1 the field, dicers and thimble riggers. We hurried by after the hoose, the vying caps and jackets, and past the meat-faced women, a butcher's dame nuzzling thirstily her clove of orange, or nuzzling thirstily her clove of orange. Now that's just a brilliant bit of writing by Joyce, the way he's describing there. So in your mind, just visualize being at a race meeting, and horses, bookies, and so on and so forth. So let me read that again. It's Stephen Dallas thinking here. He says, when Cranley, a person called Cranley, which actually we read that name Cranley before in the previous 20 pages. So this is Cranley is a friend of Stephen Dallas. Where Cranley led me to to get rich quick. Led me to the race meeting to get rich quick, to back horses and win money. Hunting his winners, among the mud-splashed breaks. Hunting his winners, looking for winners to back winners and horses, amid the balls of bookies on their pitches. Just imagine the bookies on their pitches, amid the balls of bookies on their pitches, and reek of the canteen and the race meeting, whatever, over the motley slush, the motley, bunch of people. Even money, fair rebel. No, that's even money is fair rebel. That's the name of a horse. Even money, fair rebel. 10-1 the field. That's what you'd hear, at a race meeting. Dicers and timber riggers. We hurried by after the hoofs. The horses. The vying caps and jackets. Just imagine horses racing towards the finish. The vying caps and jackets. The vying caps and jackets. That's just great. Fantastic way of describing that. The vying caps and jackets, and past the meat-faced women. And past the meat-faced women, a butcher's dame, nuzzling thirstily her clove of orange. Great imagery from Joyce there, and he's poking a bit of fun here. And past the meat-faced women, a butcher's dame, nuzzling thirstily her clove of orange. Next line. Shouts rang shrill from the boys' playfield, and a whirring whistle. Excuse me. Now, just visualize the boys are still playing cricket out in the field. Shouts rang shrill from the boys' playfield, and a whirring whistle. That's a great way to describe it. A brilliant line from Joyce. And a whirring whistle. Visualize if someone blowing a whistle. It's like a whirring whistle. Next line. Again, a goal. I am among them, among their battling bodies, in the medley, the joist of life. You mean that knock need mother's darling, who seems to be slightly cross-sick? Joyce. Time shocked rebounds, shock by shock, Joyce, slush and uproar of battles, the frozen death pew of the slain, a shout of spear spikes baited with men's bloody guts. So this is Stephen Dell's just thinking here, and Joyce has put his thoughts on paper. This I think is what this referred to with the streamline of consciousness. A lot of people say it is, which is basically I think now, putting the thoughts on paper. So this is Stephen de Dallas here thinking, again a goal. So there was a goal scored on the hockey field. Again a goal. Now Stephen Dallas is thinking here again. I am among them. He's more saying I'm among all them boys and basically people in general life. I am among them, among their battling bodies in a medley. He's just thinking about himself or anybody. In life in general. I am among them, among their battling bodies in a medley. The joist of life. We're all in this joist of life. You mean that knock need mother's darling, who seems to be slightly cross-sick? Now he's referring to that young boy that with the snails ink thing on his face, that young kind of weakling of a kid. You mean that knock needs mother's darling, who seems to be slightly cross-sick? He seems to be sickly. He's thinking about him. Joyce, he's thinking about, the joist of life. Time shocked rebounds. Shock by shock, Joyce. Slush and uproar, thinking in general. Joyce. Slush and uproar of battles. The frozen death pew of the slain. A shout of spear spikes baited with men's bloody guts. He's just thinking about wars in the past, and he's just life in general. It's just one medley. It's the joist of life. We're all involved in it. That's what he's thinking about there. Next line. Now then, Mr. DC said, rising, get up in the seat. Next line. He came to the table, pinning together his sheets, which obviously the letter has two sheets. He's pinning them together with a pin or something along them lines. He came to the table, pinning together his sheets. Stephen stood up from his seat. Next line. I have put the matter into a nutshell, Mr. Deasy said. It's about the foot and mouth disease. Just look through it. There can be no two opinions on the matter. That's pretty self-explanatory. So this is Mr. DC talking. I have put the matter into a nutshell, Mr. DC said to the letter he wrote. It's about the foot and mouth disease. Just look through it. There can be no two opinions on the matter. Next line, mere trespass on your valuable space. The doctrine of laissez-faire, which so often in our history, our cattle trade, the way of all our old industries, Liverpool Ring, which jockeyed the Galway harbour scheme, European conflagration, grain supplied through the narrow waters of the Channel, the pluter perfect in imperturbability of the Department of Agriculture, pardoned by a classical allusion, Cassandra, by a woman who was no better than she should be, to come to the point at issue. Now let me read that back in. I have put the matter, this is Mr. DC speaking, I have put the matter into a nutshell. He's talking about the letter. It's about the foot and mouth disease. It's about the foot and mouth disease. Just look through it. So he's basically saying here to Stephen Dallas, look through. You will have a look through my letter here. Read my letter. Just look through it. There can be no two opinions on the matter. Now, right here, may I trespass on your valuable space? This here now is Stephen Dallas reading the letter. He's reading the letter in his mind. And he's not reading now the next paragraph. He's not reading the letter from start to finish. He's just reading half lines of this letter, because it doesn't make sense. So all he's doing here in his mind is he's reading bits and pieces of this letter, half lines, full lines, and so on and forth. And this, and then it will make more sense reading this. So Stephen Dallas is reading this letter, and he's reading it in his mind. And he reads, may I trespass on your valuable space? The doctrine of laissez-faire, which so often in our history, our cattle trade, you see, there's a one or two lines missing, and then he goes, our cattle trade, and then there's probably a few more lines that's not down here. The way of all our old industries, and then there's probably, he doesn't read another two or three lines. Liverpool Ring, which jockeyed the Galway harbour scheme, which was probably some scheme that was meant to go to Galway, but it was jockeyed. It was stopped by Liverpool Ring, which jockeyed the Galway harbour scheme. European conflagration, grain supplies to the narrow waters of the Channel. The pluperfect imperturbability of the Department of Agriculture, pardon a classical allusion, Cassandra, by a woman who was no better than she should be, to come to the point at issue. Well, basically, as I said, Stephen Dallas, he hasn't read the letter fully. He's only read bits and pieces, a few lines here and there, and then that whole paragraph makes sense. Next line. I don't mince words, do I, Mr. DC asked as Stephen read on. I don't mince words, do I? Mr. DC said as Stephen read on. Next line. Next line. Foot and mouth disease, known as Koch's preparation, serum and virus, percentage of salted horses, Rinderpest, emperor's horses at Mertentech, Lower Austria, veterinarian surgeons, Mr. Henry Blackwood. Price, courteous offer, a fair trial, dictates of common sense, all important question, in every sense of the word, take the bull by the horns, thanking you for the hospitality of your columns. So he is continuing to read the letter here. Now, see, Mr. DC interrupted him. I don't mince words, do I, Mr. DC asked as Stephen read on. Now, Stephen is reading on the letter again in his mind, but he's not reading the letter completely. He's reading sporadic bits. Foot and mouth disease, and then he misses. He goes out next part of the next line. Known as, you get the general idea. known as conscious preparation, serum and virus, percentage of salted horses, Rinderpest, Emperor's horses at Murzas, Lower Austria, veterinarian surgeons, Mr. Henry Blackwood, price, courteous offer, a fair trial, dictates of common sense, all important question. Now, all important question, that sentence was probably, well, the all important question is, next time, in every sense of the word, take the bull by the horns, thanking you for the hospitality of your columns. Now, that's just Joyce up to his mischievous self again, you know. He hasn't given us the whole letter. He's only reading bits and pieces. But come on, James. Next line. I want that to be printed and read, Mr. Deasy said. You will see at the next outbreak they will put an embargo on Irish cattle, and it can be cured. It is cured. My cousin Blackwood Price writes to me it is regularly treated and cured in Austria by cattle doctors there. They offered to come over here. I am trying to work up influence with the department. Now I'm going to try publicly. I'm surrounded by difficulties by, pause, intrigues by, pause, backstairs influence by, it's like a pause there. He raised his forefinger and beat the air oldly before his voice spoke. Just imagine Mr. Deasy raising his forefinger. That's great imagery there again. Next line. Mark my words, Mr. Dallas, he said. England is in the hands of the Jews. In all the highest places, her finances, her press, and they are the signs of a nation's decay. Wherever they gather, they eat up the nation's vital strength. I have seen it coming these years. As sure as we are standing here, the Jew merchants are ready at their work of destruction. All England is dying. So this is Mr. Deasy here saying to Mr. McDonald, mark my words. He starts ranting and raving and giving out about Jewish people. Mark my words, Mr. Deasy said. He said, England is in the hands of the Jews, in all the highest places. Her finances, her press, and they are the signs of a nation's decay. Wherever they gather, they eat up the nation's vital strength. I have seen it coming these years. As sure as we're standing here, the Jew merchants are ready at their work of destruction. All England is dying. Next line. He stepped swiftly off. He stepped swiftly off, his eyes coming to blue life as he passed a broad sunbeam. He faced about and back again. That's just brilliant writing from Joyce there again. Fantastic writing. I mean, we're only up to page 29 now in this book, and the page goes on for. Well, the book I'm holding here, this book goes on for 681 pages, and I mean, look at all the brilliant writing we've come across. I mean, look at this for a line in writing here. He stepped swiftly off, his eyes coming to blue life as he passed a broad sunbeam. Visualize Mr. Deasy. He's just walking past the window, and the sun shines in his eyes, and then you can see that his eyes are blue. He stepped swiftly off, his eyes coming to blue life as they passed a broad sunbeam. Like, what a brilliant line from Joyce. And what an absolute crying shame that Joyce never won the Nobel Prize for Literature, which, you know, all the great lines we've come across so far. Is wonder at times. He stepped swiftly off, his eyes coming to blue life. Brilliant imagery there as well. The light hit his eyes, and then you could see they were blue as they passed a broad sunbeam. He faced about and back again. Next line, dying, he said, if not dead by now. This is Mr. Deasy speaking again. Dying, he's not about all England dying. All England is dying. Dying, he said, if not dead by now. Then he sings out this, I think. The herders cry from street to street, shall weave all England's winding sheet. Next line. His eyes, open wide in vision, stared sternly across the sunbeam in which he halted. Now he's visualized Mr. Deasy at the window and the sun shining in his eyes. His eyes, open wide in vision, stared sternly across the sunbeam in which he halted. Next line. A merchant, Stephen said, is one who buys cheap and sells dear. Jew or Gentile, is it not? So Stephen Dallas says, Morris confronted Mr. Deasy here. He says, a merchant, because Mr. Deasy was giving out about the Jewish merchants, and so Stephen said, a merchant, Stephen said, is one who buys cheap and sells dear, sells expensive. Jew or Gentile, is it not? Next line. They sinned against the light, Mr. Deasy said gravely, and you can see the darkness in their eyes, and that is why they are wanderers on the earth to this day. So Mr. Deasy is giving out here about Jewish people in general. He's saying they have sinned against the light. Mr. Deasy said gravely, they have sinned against the light, Mr. Deasy said gravely, and you can see the darkness in their eyes. Don't know about that now. I had a good lot of very good friends, Jewish friends out in New York. They sinned against the light, Mr. Deasy said gravely, and you can see the darkness in their eyes, and that is why they are wanderers on the earth to this day. Just basically giving out about Jewish people, more or less. Next line. On the steps of the parish stock exchange, the gold-skinned men quoting prices on their gemmed fingers, gabbles of geese, they swarmed loud, uncouth, about the temple, their heads thick-plotting under mallee-dried silk hats. Not theirs, their clothes, their speech, their gestures, their full, slow eyes, belied the words, the gestures eager and unoffending, but knew the rancours massed about them, and knew their zeal was vain patience to heap and hoard, time surely would scatter all. A hoard heaped by the roadside, plundered and passing on, their eyes knew the years of wandering, and patient knew the dishonours of their flesh. So just visualize, this is probably Stephen Dallas thinking here now, but visualize, which I'm sure most people have seen on television, visualize like a stock exchange, people, put up their hand, selling this and selling that. It's just great the way Joyce has captured the whole picture, and just he's painted the picture here with words as clear as day, more or less. On the steps of the parish stock exchange, the gold-skinned men quoting prices on their gemmed fingers. Great imagery. Gabbles of geese. They remind you of geese gabbling. If you ever see a bunch of geese, gabbling, that's what they would remind you of. Gabbles of geese. They swarmed loud. They're all swarming all over the place. Uncouth about the temple, their heads thick plotting under mallee-dyed silk hats. Not theirs. No, I don't understand what they are not theirs, but I'm going to give that more thought. Their clothes, this speech, their gestures, their full, slow eyes bellied the words. The gestures eager and unoffending, but knew the rancours massed about them, and knew their zeal and vain patience to heap and hoard. Time surely would scatter. And now Stephen Dallas is more thinking it. Time surely will scatter. In time, we'll all be scattered. Time surely will scatter all, a hoard, and we'll all be like a hoard heaped by the roadside, plundered and passing on. And now he's thinking about Jewish people in general. I think their eyes knew the years of wandering, and patient knew the dishonours of the flesh. That's what that's basically about there. A few lines I don't understand. I'd need more time to think about that, and right now I just don't have it. Next line. Who has not? Stephen said. So Stephen's answered the question here. They sinned against the light, Mr. Deasy said. And Stephen has said, who has not sinned against the light? Mr. Deasy answers, what do you mean, Mr. Deasy asked. Next line. He came forward a pace and stood by the table. His underjaw fell sideways, open, uncertainly. Is this all wisdom? He waits to hear from me. So, what do you mean, Mr. Deasy asked. He came forward a pace. Mr. Deasy came forward a pace and stood by the table. His underjaw fell sideways. Just visualize his underjaw. He's probably old. His underjaw fell sideways, open, uncertainly. Is this all wisdom? Stephen Dallas here has started to think. I would think that sounds right. Is this all wisdom? He waits to hear from me. This is Stephen Dallas thinking. He waits for me to hear. Excuse me. Next line. History, Stephen said, is a nightmare from which I am trying to awake. Stephen also said that. Next line. From the playfield the boys raised a shout, a whirring whistle, goal. What if that nightmare gave you a back kick? Now this, you see, Joyce will bring in the hockey match again into the whole picture here. From the playfield the boys raised a shout. You can just imagine all these boys playing their hockey match. From the playfield the boys raised a shout. So this is all still part of, this is the picture Joyce is painting still. The game is still going on. From the playfield the boys raised a shout, a whirring whistle, goal. That's just brilliant the way Joyce, a whirring, that's a whistle, it does whir like that. A whirring whistle, a goal. Someone scored a goal, so they missed. The referee blew a whistle, a whirring whistle, goal. What if that nightmare gave you a back kick? What if that nightmare gave you a back kick? I'll have to think more about that. Stephen else is thinking about what Mr. Deasy has said, I would say. Next line. The ways of the Creator are not our ways, Mr. Deasy said. All history moves towards one great goal, the manifestation of God. So that's pretty self-explanatory. The ways of the Creator, which is God, are not our ways. They're not our ways. We don't understand everything. Mr. Deasy said, all history moves towards one great goal, the manifestation of God. Next line. Stephen jerked his thumb towards the window, saying, Stephen jerked his thumb towards the window, saying, that is God. That is God. So Stephen jerked his thumb towards the window. So Stephen has pointed out to the window, out into the open air, to nature outside, and he says, that is God. Stephen jerked his thumb towards the window, saying, that is God. I don't know what he refers to there now, actually. That is God. I'll think about more about that. Next line. Hooray, I, fee. Hooray, I, fee. That line, that is still the boys playing hockey. Hooray, I, fee. One team is rejoicing, I'd say, after scoring the goal. Hooray, so on and so forth. Next line. What, Mr. Deasy asked. A shout in the street, Stephen answered, shrugging his shoulders. A shout in the street, Stephen answered, shrugging his shoulders. That's a bit of a puzzle there now that has to be figured out. The ways of the Creator are not our ways, Mr. Deasy said. All history moves towards one great goal, the manifestation of God. Stephen jerked his thumb towards the window, saying, that is God. He's pointing towards the window, obviously outside the window. Hooray, this comes from the hockey field. Mr. Deasy said, what? Mr. Deasy asked. A shout in the street. So Stephen Dallas said, a shout in the street. Stephen answered, shrugging his shoulders. I don't understand what he means by that now, but I'll give that more thought. A shout in the street, and Joyce is saying something here, but we don't know what he's saying yet. But Joyce is definitely saying something else here. A shout in the street, Stephen answered, shrugging his shoulders. This is another great thing about Ulysses. There's so many puzzles going on, and it's a test to your imagination and your visual intelligence to figure out what actually is going on. That's what makes Ulysses such a fantastic book as well. A shout in the street, Stephen answered, shrugging his shoulders. It's like a little puzzle here. These few lines, we don't know what he's talking about yet. Next line. Mr. Deasy looked down and held for a while the wings of his nose, tweaked between his fingers. Great imagery. Looking up again, he set them free. That's great imagery from Joyce again. That needs more thought. What Joyce is actually on about there. Next line. I am happier than you are, he said. This is Mr. Deasy speaking. I am happier than you are, he said. We have committed many errors and many sins. A woman brought sin into the world. Joyce is just such an absolutely brilliant humorous writer. He's always saying things like, um, to get left. Let me read that again. I am happier than you are, he said. We have committed many errors and many sins. A woman brought sin into the world. For a woman who was no better than she should be, Helen, the runaway wife of Menelaus, 10 years the Greeks made war on Troy. A faithless wife first brought the strangers to our shore here. Macmorrough's wife and her layman O'Rourke, Prince of Breffni. A woman too brought Parnell low. Many errors, many failures, but not the one sin. I am a struggler now at the end of my days, but I will fight for the right till the end. For Ulster will fight, and Ulster will be right. Now, let me just read this a second. I want to look up that name. What's that name? Okay, Menelaus, king of Sparta and husband of Helen, attacked Troy to bring Helen back. That's what that Menelaus was. So Joyce is having a bit of fun here with women in general, basically. That's what's going on here. I am happier than you are, he said. We have committed many errors and many sins. A woman brought sin into the world. Eve, for a woman who was no better than she should be. Helen, the runaway wife of Menelaus. 10 years the Greeks made war on Troy. A faithless wife first brought the strangers to our shore here. Brought the English to Ireland. A faithless wife. Macmorrough's wife and her layman O'Rourke, Prince of Breffni, which is, they were possibly the first people that invited the English into Ireland, going back 800 years ago, to settle some dispute or something. A woman too brought Parnell down. Charles Stewart Parnell was a great figure in Irish history here, and I know Joyce and Joyce's father was a huge fan of Charles Stewart Parnell. And basically, Charles Stewart Parnell had an affair. He was married and he had an affair with a woman, and I think the Catholic Church went against him, and the Catholic Church went against him, and basically Charles Stewart Parnell lost a lot of support and so on and so forth, and actually I think Joyce's father blamed the Catholic Church for all that, and that's one of the reasons that Joyce had a kind of a bit of a dislike for the Catholic Church in general. I think that's one of the reasons. A woman brought Parnell down, brought Parnell low. Many errors, many failures, but not the one sin. I am a struggler now at the end of my days. This is Mr. Deasy speaking. I'm a struggler now. I'm at the end of my days. But I will fight for the right till the end. For Ulster will fight and Ulster will be right. That's kind of something. Ulster will fight and Ulster will be right. That's something that they say up in the north of Ireland. Next line. Stephen raised the sheets in his hand, the two sheets from the letter. Next line. Well, sir, he began. What's that now? Stephen raised the sheets in his hand. Well, sir, he began. Next line. I foresee, Mr. Deasy said, that you will not remain here very long at this work. You were not born to be a teacher, I think. Perhaps I am wrong. Mr. Deasy has said that, so Mr. Dedalos. And Stephen has answered, a learner rather, Stephen said. Next line, and here, what will you learn more? Mr. Deasy shook his head. Next line, who knows, he said. To learn one must be humble, but life is a great teacher. Who knows, he said. To learn one must be humble, but life is a great teacher. Great writing. Next line, Stephen rustled the sheets again. Just imagine Stephen as rustling the sheets. Great imagery from Joyce again. Next line, as regards these, he began. The two sheets he's holding in his hand. The letter, as regards these, he sent to Mr. Deasy. Yes, Mr. Deasy said, you have 2 copies there, if you can have them published at once. And then Telegraph Irish Homestead. this is Steve. I will try, Stephen said, and let you know tomorrow. I know two editors slightly. So Stephen Dallas knows two editors of in the paper. Newspaper called the Telegraph and Irish Homestead, and he's going to try and get these two letters published next time. That will do, Mr. Deasy said briskly. I wrote last night to Mr. Field, MP. There is a meeting at the Cattle Traders Association today at the City Arms Hotel. I asked him to lay my letter before the meeting. You see if you can get it into your papers. What are they? Let me read that again. That will do, Mr. Deasy said briskly. I wrote last night to Mr. Field. Now, this is delivered by Joyce. I wrote last night to Mr. Field. They're talking. These letters are about the foot and mouth disease, which is a disease to cattle. So Joyce said, I wrote last night to Mr. Field. Why is he called Mr. Field? This is delivered from Joyce again. It's about agriculture and land. And Mr. D said, I wrote last night to Mr. Field. The surname is Field. So this is humour from Joyce again. I wrote last night to Mr. Field, MP. There's a meeting of the Cattle Traders Association today at the City Arms Hotel. I asked him to lay my letter before the meeting. You see if you can get it into your two papers. What are they? What are they again? And Stephen answered, the Eden Telegraph. And then he's cut off again. Next line. That will do, Mr. Deasy said. There is no time to lose. Now I have to answer that letter from my cousin. Next line. Good morning, sir, Stephen said, putting the sheets in his pocket. Thank you. Putting the letter in his pocket. Next line. Not at all, Mr. Deasy said, as he searched the papers on his desk. I like to break a lance with you, old as I am. Not at all, Mr. Deasy said, he searched the papers on his desk. Just visualize he's searching around his desk with the papers on top. I like to break a lance with you, old as I am. I like to have a little argument with you, break a lance with you, debate, whatever. Next line. Good morning, sir, Stephen said again, bowing to his bent back. Next line. He went out by the open porch and down the gravel path under the trees, hearing the cries of voices and cracks of sticks from the playfield. The lions couchant on the pillars as he passed out through the gate. Toothless terrors. Still I will help him in his fight. Mulligan will dub me a new name, the bullock befriending bard. Let me just stop for 1 or 2 seconds. I want to look up a word here. Okay. Right, so let me read that again. Stephen Dallas now is leaving the building. He went out by the open porch and down the gravel paths. Gravel, little small stones. You can nearly hear the stones cracking with the great imagery from Joyce. He went down by the open porch and down the gravel path under the trees. Passing under trees. Hearing the cries of voices and crack of sticks. Hearing the cries of voices. The boys playing the hockey match. Hearing the cries of voices and crack of sticks. The clash of the hockey sticks and crack of sticks from the playfield. The lions couching on the pillars as he passed out through the gate. Now, just imagine the pillars. The lions couching on the pillars as he passed out through the gate. These are the brilliant pictures that Joyce paint all the time. The lions. Just imagine two lions on top of the pillars. They're two pillars basically with two lines, kind of lying down there. The lions couching on the pillars out as he passed out to the gate. So two, stone lines. The lions couching on the pillars as he passed out to the gate. Toothless terrors, referring to the lion, the stone lines. Toothless terrors. Still I will, and Stephen Dallas is thinking. Still I will help him in his fight. This foot and mouth debacle he's involved with. I will help Mr. Deasy. Still I will help him in his fight. Mulligan will dub me a new name. Buck Mulligan, remember? Buck Mulligan will dub me a new name. The bullock befriending bard. Next line. Mr. Dallas. So this obviously is next line. Running after me. No more letters, I hope. So Mr. Deasy has followed him out and he shouts, Mr. Dallas. Next line. Now this is Stephen Dallas thinking. running after me. No more letters, I hope. He's thinking, oh, that's Mr. Dedalis running after me. No more, I hope he's no more letters for me. No more letters, I hope. Next line, just one moment, Mr. Deasy speaking. Just one moment. Next line, yes, sir, Stephen said, turning back at the gate. Next line, Mr. Deasy halted, breathing hard and swallowing his breath. You can visualize it very clearly. Mr. Deasy halted, breathing hard and swallowing his breath. Next line, I just wanted to say, he said, Ireland, they say, has the honour of being the only country which never persecuted the Jews. Do you know that? No. And do you know why? Mr. Deasy said that. I just want to say, he said, Ireland, they say, has the honour of being the only country which has never persecuted the Jews. Do you know that? No. And do you know why? Next line. He frowned sternly on the bright hair. That's great imagery from Joyce again. He frowned sternly on the bright hair. Next line. Why, sir? Stevens asked, beginning to smile. Next line. Because she never let them in, Mr. Deasy said solemnly. Joyce having a bit of fun now. Here, I think again. Because she never let them in, Mr. Deasy said solemnly. That's Joyce's humour. Yeah, he's just having a bit of fun. With Jewish people, that's all. He's not being malicious or anything like that. Joyce obviously liked to crack a lot of jokes in his writing. Because she never let them in, Mr. D says something. A cough ball of laughter leaped from his throat, dragging after it a rattling chain of a plymmed, whatever, I can't pronounce that word. He turned back quickly, coughing, laughing, his lifted arms waving in the air. That's great writing from Joyce all around there. A cough ball of laughter leaped from his throat, dragging after a rattling chain of flames. He turned back quickly, coughing, laughing, his lifted arms waving in the air. You can visualize that very clearly. Next line. She never let them in, he cried again through his laughter as he stamped on gated feet over the gravel of the path. That's why. Now visualize Mr. Deasy here now. You can nearly visualize him clearly on this gravel path. Stony path. She never let them in, he cried again through his laughter as he stamped on gated feet over the gravel of the path. That's why. Next line. On his wise shoulders, through the checkerwood of leaves, the sun flung spangles, dancing kinds. I mean, what an absolutely brilliant line from Joyce. That is just a fantastic line of writing there. Now, just visualize the genius of Joyce in that line there. On Mr. Deasy's shoulders, on his wise shoulders, through the checkerwood of leaves. Just visualize looking through the leaves on a tree. On his wide shoulders, through the checkerwood of leaves. Just visualize, send your mind to looking through leaves. Through the checkerwood of leaves, the sun flung spangles. The sun is shining on these leaves, and there's little drops of water on the leaves, and they're falling down from the trees, and they will remind you of like spangles, dancing kinds. On his wide shoulders, through the checkerwood of leaves, the sun flung spangles, the little balls of water. The sun flung spangles, dancing kinds. What fantastic writing from Joyce. Absolutely brilliant writing. So I want to have another little break, and that's why, lines like that, which, it's not just one or two or three or four lines. These lines are throughout Ulysses. And that's what made Joyce genius, among other things. But I'm going to stop now at that, and until next time, as they say, which will be in a day or two.